Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Slingin Leather, Southern California's official combat sports show, and I am your host, Fresh Cut Scuba Steve. Thank y'all for tuning back in. Quick shout out to Delmar Lopez from Tip Top Barbershop in Uptown Whittier, always coming through with the great cuts, much appreciated. This weekend, ladies and gentlemen, we got UFC 292, and these great fights just keep coming this weekend, ladies and gentlemen. This entire summer has just been the summer of combat sports, has it not? We've had so many great events that we've gone over, and this is just another to add to the heap, ladies and gentlemen. At UFC 292, some of the UFC's biggest young stars are going to be taking stage, as well as many undefeated and perceptively undefeated fighters. As many of you know, Ian Gary looks to remain undefeated in the UFC's welterweight division. Marlon Vera is looking to get back into that bantamweight title picture, as well as one of the UFC's biggest stars since he ever stepped in to Dana White's Contender Series. Sean O'Malley is taking on Aljamain Sterling for the UFC's bantamweight title. And not even gonna lie, ladies and gentlemen, despite all these superlatives that I'm giving this fight card, we've already lost 4 fights out of this, and many have been replaced. We're gonna talk about some of them. Cody Garbrandt was originally slated to take on Mario Bautista. He's now taking on Damon Blackshear. I got Bautista in that fight. First fight of the main card. We're gonna start with the prelims. A little bit of an interesting show structure today. We got Rob Font against Song Yadong that was also axed. Rob Font ended up fighting Corey Sandhagen a couple weekends ago and didn't go quite well. Corey did a great job of maintaining that top pressure. Marlon Vera was initially slated to fight Henry Cejudo after he just challenged Aljamain for the belt. And Jeff Neal was originally scheduled to fight Ian Machado Gary. However, they were able to replace it with another Neal in the welterweight division in Neil Magny. So we do get to see some of the UFC's big young stars still go in and throw some leather this weekend. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go with one of the big fights in the prelims, the featured prelim, as a matter of fact, in Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez, best nickname, one of the best nicknames in the UFC, taking on Dennis Tululin in the middleweight division. And despite RoboCop being one of my absolute favorites, I love watching that dude go in and fight. Whether decision's knockout, he gets knocked out or he knocks out his opponent, whatever happens, that dude is absolute fireworks. He's 4-2 currently in the UFC, and he's one of the toughest human beings alive. He suffered one of the most gnarly cuts right above the bridge of the nose, and it was one of the most gruesome cuts that I've ever seen, and one of the most gruesome cuts that Daniel Cormier had ever seen, as he mentioned in the post-fight interview. And despite this cut, he comes back to win the fight. And in his last outing, he did go against a judoka called Bruno Ferreira. And despite Ferreira being undersized and everything, he was able to catch RoboCop with the left hook coming in. And even though he's one of the toughest guys out there, it still seems that he does have that off button that many fighters allude to. And it's really going to be interesting whether or not his chin is able to actually hold up. Not his eyebrow. We all know his eyebrow's fine. But Tululin is a great striker in and of himself. Despite being 1-2 in the UFC, he does a great job of mixing his striking well with his wrestling. And with this skill set, I think he's best off trying to avoid his power and standing up with RoboCop. I think it's the best action if he actually goes, takes him down, and is able to land some ground and pound and maintain the top position. Because we all know when Gregory Rodriguez gets in there and maintains top position, he's going to win the fight. He is absolutely a savage when it comes to his top game. And despite, in my opinion, this being a razor-close fight and potentially being fight of the night, I do have Gregory Rodriguez winning this one by TKO. Next up, back to the main card we already had Mario Bautista beating Damon Blackshear in the first fight of the main card. You got to give RoboCop his due whenever he's on the card. He's just that good. But now we have the number 6 ranked UFC bantamweight in the world, Marlon Vera, taking on the number 10th ranked Pedro Munoz. And although Marlon Vera is coming off a decisive loss to Corey Sandhagen in a fight where he did not throw nearly enough offense and definitely lacked the forward pressure and volume that he had in some of his previous fights. But he still is 4-1 in his last 5. He still has that momentum going for him. He has knockout power in both of his hands late into the fight, coupled with excellent kicks. The way he knocked out Frankie Edgar was simply terrifying. And I believe that certainly against the smaller opponent in Munoz, there may be some openings for this. However, if he doesn't keep his foot on the gas like we know he's able to, I feel that he is going to have a much harder time against Pedro Munoz. And Pedro Munoz, despite being 2-3 in his last 5, is still one of the best fighters at 135 and still one of the toughest guys. Many believe that he was losing that fight to Sean O'Malley. It doesn't really matter. He got eye poked. It's a wash. I don't really consider those outings, considering so much could have happened. Pedro could have hurt Sean. Sean could have hurt Pedro. It could have gone many different ways. But I think the avenue for success in this fight is looking for the grappling exchanges to mitigate that size disadvantage. He's going into this fight with a 5.5 reach disadvantage, which is simply insane. You never really see that type of discrepancy in the bantamweight division, but he's going to have to fight tooth and nail to close the distance against Marlon Vera if he does choose to actually stand with him. I don't think this is going to be the case, though. I think Munoz is going to really try tooth and nail to get in on a takedown attempt on Vera. However, I just don't see Vera being inept enough on the ground or being inept enough while defending takedowns for Munoz to have any real success in this fight. I don't see Munoz getting finished, considering he wants to probably go out there and show his toughness after losing after getting a no contest in the Sean O'Malley fight via eye poke. I do still see this being a very close fight, and I do see Marlon Vera taking this one by decision. Next, we have the Neil filling in for the Neil. Neil Magny, the number 11th ranked men's welterweight in the world, taking on the number 13th ranked Ian Machado Gary. And Neil Magny is 5-4 in his last 9. Whenever you get guys that are on this, rotating streak of wins and losses, it's really interesting to see what type of matchups they're going to actually get. And especially with an unusual guy like Neil Magny. He's very long and very tall, despite being 5-4 in his last 9. He is 6'3" and has an 80-inch reach, which sounds like a middleweight, which is just ridiculous. He's absolutely ginormous for this division, coupled with his, very crisp striking and a lot of his kicks. He's very, very tall, so his kicks come at a very long range. He looks to really outpoint his opponents. He looks to win by decision. He hasn't finished a whole lot of his fights. However, I do feel that this is going to be an opportunity where he could finish this fight. Ian Gary has been dropped by lesser opponents, such as Song Kanan. And despite this being the case, Ian Gary is an undefeated 12-0 with a level of confidence that is only really achievable by someone who is undefeated and in his position. Despite him being very long, being 6'3" as well, he is going to have an 8-inch reach disadvantage in this fight. He only has a 74-inch reach, while Neil Magny has an 80-inch reach, which is simply ridiculous. And not only that, he will have to close the distance using his, if he's going to want to use his hands, which are very good, he's really going to have to use it to close the distance. He's not going to be able to stay at range with Neil and use his hands. The real attack that he has at a distance are those devastating high kicks. We saw him hit Daniel Rodriguez, who had never been finished, and put him down. He sat him down and finished the job. I think it's very possible that Neil gets caught with one of these, and we see Ian Gary really capitalize on this instance. However, his unproven grappling may be an avenue for victory. He said he took on the last name Machado from his wife so he could be better at grappling. Who knows? I'm not a grappler. I could... Any path to success is one that I will consider. And if it's changing one's name to a Brazilian last name like Machado, who knows? Maybe he's a better grappler than he was when he was just Ian Gary. However, I have to discuss one main factor of this fight that I find absolutely ridiculous, and that is the line on this fight. Neil Magny is currently a 4-1 underdog against Ian Machado Gary, and it is one of the biggest discrepancies I've ever seen. Even though Ian Gary has steamrolled a lot of his opponents and has been a great finisher in the UFC, I don't really think he is deserving of being a 4-1 favorite against a guy who has proven himself to be a mainstay in the division, gatekeeper, whatever you call it. He's in his division in the best organization in the world. You gotta realize that there's a lot of experience and that there's a lot of non-tangibles that go into that experience. So with a 4-1 favorite, I think that is insanely high. I don't even think that's a little high. I think that's insanely high. I still have Ian Gary outpointing Neil Magny, winning this by decision. I think he may land the harder shots on the inside, which will be the biggest difference in this fight. But however, I do see Neil Magny getting the advantage in this one. Next up, we have the Women's Strawweight Championship being contested. The champion, Zhang Magnum Wei Li, is taking on Amanda Lemos for the strap. And Zhang Wei Li, despite her outings against Rose Namajunas, is completely undefeated. She is 7-0 in the UFC and has absolutely dominated everyone she has gone against, with the exception to the first probably Joanna Champion fight, or Joanna Violence fight, whatever you want to call her. I can't pronounce her last name. That was a razor thin decision. And she has not lost to anyone in the most stacked women's division there is out there. Now that Amanda Nunes is out of bantamweight, maybe that'll start to come to fruition again. But as of right now, strawweight is the most stacked division in the UFC. And she goes out there and runs through everyone not named Rose Namajunas. Doug Rose, I need you to come back. Come back soon. She's my favorite female fighter in the world, mostly due to the fact that she's dominated the only woman who hasn't had the opportunity or the opponent that she can be dominated against, like Thug Rose. And despite Thug Rose having her strengths and her weaknesses, Zhang Wei Li is the most well-rounded fighter in the women's strawweight division. And a lot of that is facilitated by her constant forward pressure on the feet. She never let Carla Esparza get off her back foot and attempt to shoot a takedown. Zhang Wei Li was in complete control of that fight and did an incredible job of actually showing that she has the physical power to overcome anything that Carla Esparza had to offer her. And gonna be honest with you, I haven't seen anyone who's displayed this type of strength. I don't know if any other strawweight in the UFC is capable of picking up an unweight cut Francis Ngannou at 293 pounds with a single leg, other than Zhang Wei Li. I don't think Rose could do it. I don't think a lot of other people could do it. Maybe the female fire hydrant Jessica Andrade could do it, considering she's a grappler and has a ginormous back. But the strength that she has shown out in and out of the cage is just insane. And I think when you have a non-grappler or a grappler that is wildly unseasoned like Amanda Lemos in comparison to Zhang Wei Li, I think that her grappling is going to be a big difference maker in this fight. And let's not count out Lemos herself. She is 7-1 in her last 8. She's had a great string of fights. The only loss that she's ever that she suffered in that stretch was against Jessica Andrade, when she was able to get her in a standing arm triangle, which was just a thing of beauty. It was my favorite submission of that year. You listened to Slingin Leather last year. That was my pick for submission of the year. But she is an incredibly powerful striker who does a lot of her best work on the feet. And speaking of Zhang Wei Li's pedigree on the ground, I do see her having some potential vulnerabilities on the ground, and I do not see her engaging in any ground fighting at all. I don't see her shooting any takedowns, hitting any trips. She may pressure her on the cage to potentially engage in some dirty boxing, the Yoel Romero special, but she has a 2-inch reach advantage and will have to win this fight with her jab. She needs to do her job by keeping Zhang Wei Li at a distance if she wants to go and take this fight. However, I just don't see Zhang Wei Li succumbing to the power. I see her being able to take it, and I see her imposing her will onto Amanda Lemos this weekend leading me to pick Zhang Weili locking up a submission in this fight and getting the W. And ooh, baby. Ooh, baby. Ladies and gentlemen, the men's bantamweight title, arguably the most stacked division in the UFC, is having its championship contested this weekend. We are having Aljamain Sterling, the champion, arguably the best bantamweight of all time, according to Sean O'Malley, taking on the Sugar Show himself, Sean O'Malley. And ladies and gentlemen, Aljamain Sterling, it's really hard to argue that he's not the best of all time. I mean, who hasn't he beaten is more of a comprehensive list than who he has beaten. I'm sorry, is a less comprehensive list than who he has beaten. He's beaten Henry Cejudo, Triple C. He's defeated TJ Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen, Peter Young, technically twice, and the former, a lot of people thought was the former bantamweight GOAT, Renan Barão. And it's an incomparable resume. No one else has this type of record in the bantamweight division. No one has that many names on their record like Aljamain Sterling does, especially doing as well as he has. 9-fight winning streak for the champ, one of the best submission artists currently in the UFC, and the human backpack has taken out great grapplers like Dillashaw and Corey Sandhagen. And right now, in these past 2 fights that we've seen from Aljo, he's been very, very smart with his gas tank. That first fight with Peter Yan really showed his issues with stepping on the gas too hard early in a fight. And I think, without a doubt, there's no way Aljo's going to try and strike with Sean O'Malley. I just think it's going to be one of the worst decisions of the year if he really thinks he could strike with Sean O'Malley. And he's going to take this fight to the mat as soon as he possibly can. Trip, double leg, sweep, hip throw, doesn't matter. He's going to get him to the ground, or he's going to want to get him to the ground, and he simply cannot stay at striking range with Sean O'Malley. The reach disadvantage isn't as intense. He has only a 1-inch reach disadvantage, and I believe this is going to allow Sean to stay at range, because innately Aljo's going to want to stay at his own punching range effectively giving Sean his own kicking range. And I think that if he takes his fight to the ground, it might be as dominant as we've ever thought, or as we've ever seen in the bantamweight division, considering Sean has some rather unproven grappling. However, I have been with the Sugar Show ever since he came back from that 2-year layoff. I have been riding with this dude. He's my personal favorite striker in the UFC. I don't see anyone really matching that level of striking in the bantamweight division. He has incredible power in both hands and has knocked people out with both of them. And kind of undefeated. I mean, say what you will about the Marlon Vera performance. Marlon did finish him after the drop foot issue. And for those of you who don't know what drop foot is, there's a specific nerve in your leg that once you kick it will allow your foot, or will make your foot actually go numb and make you unable to use it. This led to the finish against Sean that Marlon Vera was able to achieve. And the hugest glaring question in this fight is, will he be able to keep Sterling off of him long enough to knock him out? We all know what Sean's bread and butter is. Sean isn't out here to outpoint people. Sean isn't out here to tap people out. He's out here to put your lights out. And one of the only real scenario where we have an insight on Sean O'Malley's UFC grappling, I'm not going to talk about his jiu-jitsu competitions outside of the sport, but in the Peter Yan fight, he won that fight because he was able to mitigate the damage that was sustained on the ground. If he had gotten battered on the ground for one more minute than he allowed Peter Yan to do, he would have guaranteed lost that fight. And despite it being controversial, despite this being controversial, and despite the whole fight having people up in arms, I do see his defense being good enough on the ground on top. it's really going to be a question whether or not he's going to be able to maintain this defense on the back, which I feel is going to be the biggest question in this fight. However, all these questions will be answered Saturday, and all the results, in my opinion, lead to the Sugar Show going in and putting Aljamain Sterling's lights out. Early in the fight, I got Sugar Sean by KO. But I got to ask you guys, what do you guys think? Do you guys have any insights to this fight this weekend? Leave a comment below with your predictions for some of the fights this weekend, or anything you guys would want to suggest for the show. I love hearing from you guys, so I'll definitely read those comments, see what you guys got to say. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for more of Southern California's official combat sports show, and I will see you guys in the next one.